Hey guys, it's Shaylin. I'm here today with another writing video. Today I'm doing my yearly wrap-up video. So in these videos, I always just go through what I wrote for the year, my writing goals for the year, as well as a few other things like my reading challenge. The past few years, I've been tallying up the word count that I wrote for the year. I've decided to do away with that because personally, that data of how many words I wrote in the year was kind of meaningless to me. Like, I was just doing it for the video. It also wasn't even accurate because as I've been spending more and more time in the revision process in proportional to like a drafting process, obviously that means that your word counts for the year go down, but also you cease being able to really measure it. And I said this in a disclaimer the past few years that like how many words you wrote really only shows how many first draft words you wrote. It can't really show what you did in revision. Obviously, I moved this year. I'm in a new apartment, a new filming location. Also, obviously, I took a large part of the year off from YouTube. That's because I was moving, so I didn't have a filming space. The way that I, for years, have run my YouTube channel is I would basically batch film 5 to 8 videos in a weekend every couple months, edit them all, and schedule them all, and then not think about it. And the reason I would do that is because I was working at Readsy, where my job was running their YouTube channel and making the videos for their YouTube channel. So obviously, as you can imagine, I was stretched pretty thin, running 2 YouTube channels at once. Doing both on a weekly basis just was not possible. And so I basically had to obviously prioritize the one that was my job. And my own channel would kind of just get done in bursts. Like, I would just focus on YouTube and do nothing else for like a week, and then forget about it for the next 2.5 months, you know? Finding times to film was really hard, and so it meant that I had to really like kind of rush some content in a sense. Now that I am settled in my new filming location, I haven't been posting super regularly because I'm in grad school now and I'm really busy, but I want to make use of the fact that I now have a space that I can kind of film in whenever I want. I don't know if that will mean weekly content. What I really want to do is, instead of making weekly or regular content, is really focus on making better content, making videos that are more in-depth. They might go much longer, you know, just really detailed in the way that I didn't have the time to always do when I was, you know, making videos for another channel and having to film. It was like, oh, I have a window to film today. Like, whatever script I have, we have to run with it. And that's why in a lot of my videos you would see things like me talking and then the example as a voiceover later, because I didn't have the time to stop and find examples because I had to film right now while it was quiet. I don't have to do that anymore, which is great, but I really want to put the time into making much better content. I do want to try and post a little more regularly than I was in the fall. I have a lot of videos coming up. I'm really excited, so you might be seeing pretty regular content through January and February. But that's just to say that the algorithm really punishes you when you don't post regularly. Highly recommend turning on notifications. I know I've been mentioning this a lot, but it's just because as I've been starting to post a little bit more, I've been getting a lot of DMs and comments from people saying that they didn't know that I was back to YouTube and that my videos haven't been showing up in their subscription feed, and that they only realized I was posting again because they went to my channel and saw that I had posted new videos. I know that throughout 2024, I didn't post much for the second half of the year, and I posted very few craft videos. I have some really exciting craft videos coming up that I'm really excited about, but they're not going to be on a weekly basis because I'm on an MFA schedule, and I also want to make the videos like the best they can be, super in-depth, really approaching it like as if I was an instructor in a class, and how would I make the best possible like lecture on this topic. I wanted to start the main content of this video by talking about everything that I wrote during the year. So let's just kind of timeline this. I don't feel that this was an incredibly prolific year for me in terms of writing. It really was not. The second half of the year especially, I didn't really write over the summer because I had a project that kind of burned me out really badly. And then in the fall, I was doing my first semester of grad school and I was incredibly busy, so I was much more focused on coursework and not a lot of writing. So it really wasn't a very prolific year for me, probably one of the least prolific years for me in recent history. I would say the project that took up the most of my year and that was the most important and that I was the most proud of was my revisions on my novel, The Animal Sense. This is a book that I have kind of had in the works for a few years. I wrote the draft from the end of 2022 to the spring of 2023, started editing it back in the fall of 2023. In January, I wasn't really writing either because I was still applying to grad school and the applications were pretty much taking up all my time and energy. I started working on my Animal Sense revisions in February, and so kind of revised that book from February until March. From September to November, I did a couple more drafts. I actually trimmed the word count a lot. I took it from an 81K manuscript to a 67K manuscript. It wasn't even my intention with the draft. That happened on the final draft that I did back in November. I feel like the book is really, really tight, especially for such a character-driven book. I've been really mindful of the pace throughout because really highly character-driven work can easily feel very slow. Seeing the book become so much more streamlined and so much tighter, I think is a really good sign to me, and I have delivered the book to my agent. We might do some further revision once she's done reading. There are a few points in the book that I still think need work. I don't think it's perfect. There are a couple things especially that are nagging me that I know I need to fix. It's really developed this year. The next big project for the year was that I drafted a whole book. It was a fantasy project. I just refer to it by the acronym TBO. This was a 63,000 word draft written from March till June. That's very short for a fantasy novel, but that's testament to the fact that it's heavily underwritten. I made a whole video about this book and how displeased I was with the final product. The second half of the drafting process was a little miserable and I really underwrote it. It's like severely underwritten. Really excited about this project. I had a lot of passion for it. And it was my first attempt back into writing fantasy. I felt very excited about the book. I was so excited to start writing it. And it just deteriorated as I was writing. The main theme for this year was big disappointments. And this was a big disappointment. It was a project I thought could be something. And maybe it will be someday. I don't really know. For now, I've put the book aside and I'm just not thinking about it while I'm in grad school. I'm writing the thesis. I don't have time to beef with this fantasy book that I tried to write. But you know, since I wrote it and since it was such a disappointment, I haven't found myself really thinking about the project that much. Whereas like obviously before I wrote it, it was constantly on my mind. I was like in love with the book, you know, as you are. And normally for me, through the writing process, I fall a lot more in love with the book. In this case, throughout the writing process, I kind of fell out of love with the book. But I think that that's because I screwed up the relationship. So yeah. The final kind of novel that I worked on is my thesis, which I'm just going to refer to as Gay Cult Book because the acronym is really hard to say. I started working on this a touch in September, the first chapter and a half, so like just over 2,000 words. I wanted to just get a little bit written so that I could submit the beginning to my workshop class and get some feedback on the beginning. So yeah, I just kind of wrote a little bit over a very short period of time, and that's it. Then in terms of short fiction, I had my worst year ever for short fiction, since I started writing short fiction at least. The first story that I wrote is called You Are Contractually Obligated to Withstand Violence. I wrote this story first back in like February, and then I did some revisions throughout August and September, submitted to my university workshop. The other short story that I wrote is called Sugar and Salt. I wrote this story around November. It was for one of my MFA classes. I took an elective class on writing sex in fiction, and for the final assignment for the year, we had to write a short story that featured sex in some way. I wrote 2 flash fictions that are part of a series, and I started but haven't yet finished a third that's also going to be a part of that series, and I have like 2 more ideas for ones that will be part of that series. And then I also wrote another flash that is a little bit related but not entirely, that I'm also really excited about, although I think it needs a bit of an overhaul. Something about flash fiction clicked for me this year. Then is poetry. I wrote 3 poems this year to finish a set of 5 poems that I assembled into a little chapbook as a Valentine's gift for my girlfriend, and I wanted to make a really like special gift for like our first Valentine's Day. So I made this little chapbook. It turned out so stinking cute. So on to publications. Yeah, it's been pretty bad. In many ways, this was my fault because I was barely submitting anything. Like, my submittable was barren this year. There was nothing in there. It was a post-apocalyptic wasteland in my submittable. I actually did start submitting at the very tail end of the year, but those things are all out and I haven't heard back on them yet. That was on me, but it wasn't the most fruitful year. I published only one piece. It's called Landline. It recently came out in the newest issue of Eavesdrop magazine. Like with all my work, it'll be linked in my description and in my link tree. I'm really, really happy it ended up in Eavesdrop. I really love the magazine. They're new, but I love what they're doing. I love their mission statement, and everything that they publish is available in audio as well, which I just think is really, really cool. I also had one more piece of publishing news. I won a award, my short story I'm a Wolf in Wolf's Clothing, which was published in 2023, towards the end of 2023, in Filling Station magazine, won the gold medal for short fiction for the Alberta Magazine Awards. So this was something that like Filling Station published me initially, and then they nominated me for this award, and I ended up winning, which I'm really excited about. So because of that, you can actually now read the story online, even though it was only originally available in print. Something was messed up in the formatting of this story, and a sentence was deleted, and a paragraph break was added where there wasn't supposed to be one. So in the version that you can read online, there's like a couple weird confusing bits near the beginning. Something happened when the story was being formatted. As for publishing my novels, I have largely not talked about the publishing process for my novels online because I don't want to. Boundaries. You know, a few years ago, one of my goals was to have better boundaries on my platform. And one of the boundaries that I wanted to set for myself was that I wouldn't talk about the publishing process while I was still in it, because publishing is already full of enough disappointment. When other people are also disappointed in you, it just makes it like a million times worse. It's already like a vulnerable enough position to be in without feeling like you have to then explain all your failures to the internet, especially when, you know, the internet has a known history of reading into things in wildly incorrect ways in order to serve your desired perceptions about someone. However, obviously, it's been years with no news, so I do feel like I need to just, or like I want to, for now, I'm gonna give you this update, which is more about my feelings. Because not selling a book this year has gotten me to an all-time low in terms of excitement and belief in my writing, and I feel jaded, bitter, and honestly quite sensitive around the topic. I had multiple potential book deals fall through at the acquisition stage, seeing my work continually praised by editors, but then ultimately still either rejected or not culminate in a book deal because the book was deemed too niche or too risky, etc. at the acquisition stage, has got me questioning my place in the industry. Over 2 years on submission with no book deal has drained me and been the hardest thing I've ever gone through as a writer. Asterisk, as a writer, not as a person. Feeling so close yet so far over and over, I find myself continually projecting insecurities onto other people, thinking that everyone must think I'm a terrible writer or a fraud since I haven't been able to sell a book. I feel like people must be losing faith in me, but in truth, I'm probably just losing faith in myself. That's to say, I reached some real lows in terms of publishing this year, but I also have some promising leads, so I hope that 2025 will be the year I break through this wall I've felt stuck against. I haven't stopped writing despite all of this, but it has felt like a giant cloud over my process. I know that it will happen eventually, but eventually is starting to seem like a vaguer and vaguer concept. That's to say, big disappointments. Yes. Back to some lighter fare. Even though this was a year of big disappointments for writing, personally, it was actually a really great year for me. Maybe the best of my life. I was able to do a lot of travel. I traveled to the US, which I live right near the border of the US and Canada, so like whatever. But I also traveled to Vietnam, Indonesia, and Japan, as well as to France and Denmark. I moved, which I already touched on at the beginning of the video. I started my MFA, which was huge. I had been wanting to go back to school for years, and the stars finally aligned for me to be able to do it. I talk about my whole MFA journey in my MFA Q&A, so I won't go into the whole thing, but I'm really, really loving it so far. And if anything, I'm sad that I'm like a quarter through, like it's only 2 years and I'm done this first semester already. So I'm just trying to like treasure it. Also celebrated my 1-year anniversary with my girlfriend, who is honestly the love of my life. She has been the kind of like shining light in my whole year. Like all those other great things, like starting my MFA and traveling and stuff, even if those things hadn't happened this year, I think I probably still would have said that it was one of the best years of my life just because of her. So yeah, let's look at my goals. First, let's look at my goals for 2024 and whether or not I accomplished them. So the first one was to draft Tebow. I did this, but I hate the draft, so it kind of feels like a failure. I don't even know if I'll ever return to the book. I'm not even sure. Technically, I did that. Emotionally. Big disappointment. My next goal was to get the Animal Sense ready to go on sub. I got pretty close. I delivered the book to my agent. I did say in my previous year video that I wasn't exactly sure how to phrase this goal. I wasn't sure if it would be more accurate to say that I wanted to get it ready to send to my agent rather than to go on sub, because it was really hard to know what the editing process for this book would look like because the book is so intricate from a character perspective. And the thing about editing a very character-driven novel is that the more you edit it, the more complex and intricate the characters become. That introduces things like continuity issues, need for thematic adjustments, and kind of like a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back situation. You make a lot of progress on the most important part, which is the characters, but then you need to go adjust everything around the characters in order to fit this new depth that you've uncovered. I count this as a success. I was pretty unsure exactly what point I wanted to get the book to, whether that was ready to go on sub or ready to go to my agent. I just kind of wanted to edit it, and I did that. I had a very loose goal of trying to write more poetry, which I did not do. So my goals for 2025, the first goal is to finish the first draft of Gay Cult Book, which is my master's thesis. For various reasons, I don't think the book needs to be very long, so I'm aiming for a 60,000 word draft. I will ideally have a first draft that I can then do a little bit of polishing on. That way I can submit the book to my supervisor by the end of the year, which would kind of have me correctly on timeline for completing the MFA. My next goal is to get the Animal Sense ready to go on sub. I know that technically this was my goal last year, but I wasn't really sure. I just wanted to finish editing it, and I didn't really know how to phrase that. I delivered it to my agent, which was, I think, a success. This year I want it to be ready to go on sub. It should be ready to go on sub. It's just pending edits from my agent and a few tweaks that I personally think the book needs. And then my final goal is kind of a loose one, and it's just to write more flash and short fiction. I don't really know how to quantify this. I was gonna try and be like, write 3 flash fictions and 3 short stories, but I don't really know. I have a lot of concepts in the work. I want to put effort into actually writing them. So finally, let's close this off with my reading. So my reading goal for the year was 50 books, and I read 87. My favorite book of the year was Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, which I've been seeing on a lot of people's favorites list, and that just makes me really happy. Definitely my favorite book of the year. However, my other highlights were Alphabetical Diaries by Sheila Heti, as well as Pure Color by Sheila Heti, Coexistence by Billy Ray Belcourt, How It Works Out by Miriam Lacroix, The Coin by Yasmin Zahar, Your Driver is Waiting by Priya Guns, Lucky Red by Claudia Cravens, Grey Dog by Elliot Gish, The Skin and Its Girl by Sarah Cipher, Minor Detail by Adonia Shibley, and Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. It was a pretty good reading year for me. My goal, again, I'm always just set my reading goal at 50 books, even though I usually read way more than that. That's it for my yearly wrap up. The main theme of the year was big disappointments in my writing life, but a lot of happiness in my personal life. At least it wasn't big disappointments all around. 2025 is going to be like the year of my MFA. I'm really, really excited about that. I would love to know what your biggest accomplishment was in 2024, whether that was writing, personal, anything really. Just what was like the highlight of your year. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!